Hi there, Dr. Gary here. It's towards the end of the evening and we're still working, so sorry for this darkened scene for the video. Anyway, we are dental practice brokers and we sell dental practices. We've been dentists for 25 years, doing this for 15. So today's topic is buyer gets cold feet at the end in the sale of a dental office with multiple weak excuses. We'll get into that. As you know, we now have 10 employees. We're in 25 states, available to you 363 days a year. We take off Christmas and Easter. Now, we also have 2 CPA accountants, so we have a great team. You can reach us at 201-663-0935, website dentalpracticeguide.com or nationwide dentalpracticebrokers.com. Now, everything you're about to hear is for entertainment purposes only. It's not legal or business advice. If you're thinking about selling to a DSO, call us, because we know who the best ones are. They will often pay our commission, and we can help you navigate the waters. Some of them aren't the best DSOs. And anyone we work with that we sell their practice, we'll reimburse over $1 million. We reimburse their legal fees upon successful closing based on certain criteria. Now, so what happened here? This is just breaking, recently. Yeah, it wasn't recently, it was about 8 months ago. So I'm just thinking about it now. Just came to mind, and I never made a video about it. So the buyer gets cold feet. This is the buyer's approved for the loan. Contracts are approved and written. Contracts, are ready to be signed. Bank financing in place. Buyer had negotiations with the landlord, and they were a little rocky, a little bit, because the buyer wanted the space next door ahead of time, but wasn't ready to take it over and wanted to, kind of hold on to the real estate but not take possession of it. So some back and forth with that. But we think, but it wasn't enough of an excuse to bail out of a deal. Plus, the buyer was complaining that practice was a certain percentage of a subspecialty, but it was below 15% of the subspecialty work. So the buyer all of a sudden starts finding all of these things wrong with the practice. First of all, they say, well, 15% is that subspecialty work I don't do. We said, well, you knew that before we started. Secondly, they were trying to negotiate for the landlord for the space next door, but didn't want to take possession of it. We said, you knew that. The landlord wasn't going to give you that piece of property. He would put an outline for you, but he couldn't hold it for you. And if you didn't want to sign up for it, he can't lock it in. We tried to tell him that. And third, we think what happened was, and we had very astute dental attorneys on this, the buyer got cold feet and was grabbing at straws and excuses of why they didn't want to proceed forward. But it's essentially they got cold feet. They weren't ready. And that's understandable. I think what you should do as a buyer, if you're in that situation, rather than grabbing at straws and, well, this problem and the percentage is too low and I'm not sure and the space next door and the land, like, wait a minute. These aren't valid excuses to pull out of a deal, because if a deal were to fall apart, right, there'd be much stronger oppositions and reasons why. Believe me, if you're motivated and you spent all this time, you got the attorney, you got the contracts done, you got all the financing in place, everything's ready to go. These excuses aren't valid enough to pull out of a deal. You can pull out of it, and there's really no ramifications. Really could pull out, because you're not legally, since the contracts haven't been signed, you're not really legally bound. You'd have to check with an attorney on that. You're not legally bound as a buyer to go through with the deal, and the seller really can't do anything about it. Okay? So, and the buyer would use his excuses why they're not going through, or her excuses why they're not going through. What the problem the buyer has made is the buyer wasn't truthful. Excuse me. Sorry, just got back from the Caribbean dental cruise I sponsored. A little tough getting back to this cold weather in the Northeast. Whew. Next year I'm going to try to go away 5 times, do 5 cruises, or we may do a all-in-one cruise too. That should be a lot of fun. All on dental seminars, buying and selling dental offices. So I'm a little under the weather. Anyway, the excuses the buyer had weren't relevant enough to warrant dropping out of a deal. The buyer just got cold feet. But if the buyer was smart, they would have spoken to me and listened to me. Listen to an astute attorney with 20 plus years experience. Listen to the seller's attorney with 18 years experience. And they would have realized, don't pull out because you're afraid, because you're going to run into problems on the next deal. Even if you're not ready, there comes a time. You got to pull the trigger. And if you've been out for over a year, you're ready. And you protect yourself too. Don't forget, you can get disabled. Once you get disabled, you can't buy a practice again. Anything could happen. Interest rates are about 6% now or something like that. They're not getting any lower. They were lower in the past, but not anymore. So it would have been wise for the doctor to proceed forward. The one who loses in this deal is the buyer. The buyer has to pay the attorney. The buyer has to start over again and lose all this time. The buyer is continuing to work on the dentist dream. That is, he works with somebody else or she works with somebody else. And they're working on their dream instead of their own dream. They're that much further away from ownership, that much further away from building goodwill. In fact, I told the buyer, I said, hey, if you really hate the practice, you're going to be successful 99.75%. If you hate the practice that much, in 2 years or 3 years, we'll sell it or put an associate in there. And then by then you'll find your dream practice. Because it's probably going to take you 6 months to a year to find a dream practice or the practice you want. And you're foolish taking this chance, taking the risk. And what does the attorney think? You're going to call the attorney again on the next deal? He's going to be very wary of you thinking you're going to do the same thing. The broker, what's the broker going to think? This guy can't or gal can't pull the trigger. It's within their rights, and at the same time, I know what you go through. I did that 35 years ago when I was buying a practice. I was shaking in my boots. But usually the one who pulls out of a deal is generally the seller, not the buyer. So there weren't valid reasons. The buyer never gave us the real reason. It's just because they were nervous. We think they made a big mistake, and anybody that works with the buyer in the future is going to be a bit cautious, if you know what I mean. Anyway, thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We just came back from 2 dental lecture cruises we sponsored, and we checked out an all-in-one vacation, which we may try to give a lecture cruise there. So give us a ring, and we're ready for you. I plan to go away a couple times in January, I think December, January, and February of year 2026. So come along. Should have a great time. Well, that's another lesson for the day, and I hope you sellers learned something, and away we go. Hit the subscribe button if you want to listen to more. Be alerted to new videos that come out. Sorry for the darkness. I'm still working. I'm in the car. I'm doing the best I can. Bye.